Hey, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be showing how to set up a different type of boost trail. So with that, let's get started. So initially, I wasn't going to make a video about this, but because I have made some changes to the boost trail, which you can find on the channel, I decided that I'm going to make a video of this because I did play around with it a bit to try and make it a bit more performance friendly. The way I achieve that is that instead of using the Niagara system, I'm instead going to use a mesh as well as a material to fake the appearance of flames coming out from the exhaust. So we're going to start off with in Blender. So what we're going to do in here is first off, we're going to shift A, add a mesh, we're going to add a cylinder, and then we're going to go into edit mode, select the cylinder, and then we're going to rotate it on the y-axis 90 degrees. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top faces, top and bottom face, I'm going to press X, remove the faces, and then I'm going to layer this a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an outer, a middle, and an inner part to it, each one being longer the closer it gets to the center. So I'm going to select this, Control L, Shift D, escape, and then I'm going to click S to scale it. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Then if I Shift X, then lock it to the X axis and then only scale it in the Y and Z axis. Can make it a little smaller. Press 2 and then select the edges at the bottom. Press G and then lock it to the X axis. Just pull this out a bit, then do the same thing again. Control L, S to scale, Shift X. Oh, forgot to duplicate it. So Shift D, and then S, Shift X, and then select the edges at the bottom, grab with X, and then just do it like that. And then this is going to be the final product. So we have an outer, a middle, and an inner part. And then we're gonna exit edit mode and then just leave it as such. You can shade smooth this, which I'm actually going to do. Just right click, then shade smooth, and then that's gonna be it. Then we're gonna go to file, export, FBX. Before you export it, please make sure that the origin of it is actually set to the part that's going to be connected to the exhaust. So in this particular example, I am making it face in the X negative direction because it's going to be pointing out in the opposite direction of where the car is going. So I just want to go into edit mode real quick, select 2, select the edges on the inside. Then we're going to shift S, cursor to selected, exit edit mode, right click, and then set origin to 3D cursor. And then we're just going to set this to the center, press N. Its current location on the X is 1, set this to 0, and then just set the cursor back to the origin. And then now we're just going to export this. We're going to export FBX. And then also make sure that you click on the selected objects. You don't need to do the preset for Unreal Engine because if you already make it look in the X negative direction, then Unreal Engine should detect that and orient it properly. I'm just going to export. Then let me just save this as well. And now we're up in Unreal Engine. So we're going to go to Content, Vehicle, and then in here, I'm just going to create a new folder. Just right click, new folder. I'm going to call this Boost. And I'm going to open this up. And then in here, I'm going to put in the FBX file. And then when you're importing the file, down by the collisions, static mesh says collisions. When it says fallback collision type, set this to none. If you leave it by default, it is going to create a collision which you don't want on the object. So it's going to import. And the next thing we're going to do is you need a material, preferably 2 materials. One, let's say a magma type looking material, and then the second one is a flame type material. I'm just going to import the ones that I have. So these are the 2 materials that I have. One is this cracked pattern material. Preferably you don't want it to be as small as the one that I have here. You want it to be a little bit more larger. And then you also need a flame material. It doesn't necessarily need to be seamless. Just as long as it has a transparent background, it's not as important for the other pattern. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to right click, create a new material, and then we're going to call this M underscore boost. We're going to open up this material. Just going to save everything. And then in here, by the blend mode, we're going to select that, set it to translucent, the shading model, set this to unlit. And then we're going to take the first material, select that, head back to the, not the first material, I'm going to select the first texture, head to the material, hold down T and then left click, then do the same with the other material, the flame material, select the material, not the material, what do I keep saying material for? The texture, and then hold T and then left click, and then drag this out of it. And then what we're going to do is between the two textures, between the cracked texture and the flame texture, we're going to add a multiply node. So hold M, left click, as well as an add node. Add that, hold A, and then left click. We're also going to add a texture coordinate. So from the first texture, where the UVs, drag off and then look for COO for texture coordinate. And then above the flame texture, we're going to add a particle color. So right click and then look for particle. The first option should be the particle color. And then after the particle color and the flame texture, we're going to add two multiply nodes. So we hold M again, left click, left click. We also need a panel between the texture coordinate and the texture sample. So drag out the texture coordinate, hold P, left click to create a panel, and then we're just going to connect this between the two of them. So what we're going to do is from the R, from the red channel for the cracked texture, we're going to connect this to the top of the multiply. Oh no, wait, sorry, I made a mistake. We don't actually need the texture coordinate over here, so just connect it over here. We need it over here because we're going to connect the, going to take the texture coordinate, add it to the top of the add, and then the multiply, we're going to add this to the bottom of the add, and then from the add, we're going to connect this to the flame texture, and then from the flame texture, the RGB channel, going to connect this to the bottom of the top multiply. From the particle color, we're going to take from the RGB channel as well, and then connect that to the top of the multiply. And then that multiply is going to go into the emissive color. And then from the particle color, the alpha channel goes into the top of the second multiply. And then from the flame texture, the alpha from there goes into the bottom of the second multiply. And then that goes into the opacity until it looks like this. And then the multiply that sits between the crack texture and the add, if you increase the B value, it determines how much influence this texture will have on the flame texture. So I'm going to set mine to maybe 4. You don't want to set this too high because then otherwise you're going to start noticing the seams on the flame texture. And then to get this to move, you adjust the speed values on the panel. So I'm going to set mine to 1 on the X and then 1.5 on the Y. So as you can see, it is now moving. And then I'm going to set mine to be a two-sided material. So now you can see more obviously what it looks like. And if you do indeed, let me just show you what it looks like if you increase the multiply value by the first multiply. If I set this to maybe something like 12, as you can see, you can kind of, if you look really closely, you can see where the seam is for the flame texture, which is not exactly what you want. So I'm going to set mine back to 4, so it's less noticeable. I'm going to apply and then save. Close the material, select the material, right click, create a material instance, and then just rename this to MI Boost. I'm gonna save everything. Open up the static mesh, just dock this to the top, select the material instance, and then set this as the default material for the mesh. So now this is what it looks like. It would seem as though it is looking the incorrect direction for me. Didn't want it to look like this.
A few moments later.
I couldn't get it to rotate in a desirable manner, but I think it should still work. So we're just gonna save the material and then just close out the static mesh as well as the material. And then what you're gonna have to do now is we're gonna have to clear out the information that we have saved so far. So to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna select the BP workshop, control, actually not control, we're gonna just click here in the outliner, edit BP workshop. And then what we're going to do is after the configuration, custom event over here that gets pulled, we're going to drag off there. And then we're just going to delete game in slot. And then the slots we're looking for is the pawn. Select this, Control D. The next one is the strut for the blueprint structure. Control V. The next one is the owned cars. And then the last one, Control V, is the money. So those are the four that we are going to reset. So now compile, save, add back to workshop, play the level, and then we're gonna close this. If we play it again, there shouldn't be a car. Okay, so it's empty now. That's fine. Open up the blueprint, and then we're gonna remove these four nodes. Compile again, save. Then we're gonna go content, blueprints, blueprint structures, and then the one we're looking for is the BPS cars. Gonna add a new variable, and then this variable we're gonna call this quad question mark. We're gonna leave it as a boolean. Save, close that, head back to the workshop. Then we're gonna open up, go back to blueprints real quick. Open up the game instance, select the BPS vehicles, and then for all three cars, we need to select whether they are quads or not. Just compile this real quick. Okay, there we have it. So the, let's see, the LF, it is in fact a car with a quad exhaust. The VGT does not have quad exhaust, it only has two. And then the ZR1 does have quad exhaust. Then we'll compile, save, close this, and then about the workshop. And then we're going to compile and save the workshop blueprint, close that. And then the next thing we're going to need to do is head to the content folder, vehicles, parent vehicle. And then what we're going to do in here is we're going to go to the skeletal blueprint, not the skeletal mesh blueprint, but the skeletal blueprint. Open up this one. And then what we're going to do in here is we are going to add 4 sockets. So we're going to select the center bone, not necessarily the root bone, but the bone that every other bone is connected to, which for me is the vert. Gonna press the add, gonna add a socket, and then just want to explain this real quick. So just gonna go Shift Alt H, go into the rear view, and then Alt 2 to go into wireframe. So the way I'm going to name this is depending on the position of the exhaust proportional to the center line of the vehicle. So if it's on the left hand side of the car, then it would be the left exhaust. That would be the furthest left exhaust. And then the one next to it would be the left right exhaust. Same as on the other side, the furthest right exhaust on the right side of the car would be the right RR. And then the one next to it would be the right left because it's a little bit closer to the center. That's how I'm going to name it. So the first circuit, we are going to press F2. And I'm going to call this LL for left underscore exhaust. And then all we're going to have to do is just move it into position to be in the position of the left exhaust, which is the furthest left exhaust on the skeletal. So we're just going to do that real quick. Because I'm now done setting up these sockets, what you can do to kind of shorten the time spent on adding the sockets is once you're done with a socket, you select set socket, you control C, select the bone that it will be parented to, and then press control V, and then it will create another socket already connected to the same bone. So this is what it's going to look like with the LL, that is the furthest left exhaust tip. The LR is the one next to that, is the left right one. On the other hand, the right left is the one on the right side of the car but closer to the center, and then the right one is the furthest right from the center of the car. So that is how you would set up the sockets. And then if you have a car similar to the Venom, I've already done all of the cars for the tutorial. So this one only has 2 sockets because it only has 2 exhaust tips. It only has the 2 over here. So what I did is, depending on the center, here again, is we have the left or right because it is closer to the center. We don't have a far left one. So how I want to do it is imagine where it would be if it were a quad. So this one would be the left to right, closer to the center, but still on the left-hand side of the car. And then the other one would be the right left on the right side of the car, but close to the center. So it's the right left one. And then this would be the same if, for example, you have a car with only on the left, maybe a dual exhaust only on the left. So it would be left, 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 right. And then on the other side would be the same. It would be right, right, and right, left. You don't need to have all four sockets in every car. You just need to have the right sockets for the position of the exhaust. And then an important thing to note is that you need to have the same naming convention across all your cars because we're only going to set up the code for these sockets in the parent vehicle. So if the naming convention isn't exactly the same across all your cars, then when the code is being run, it won't be able to find the appropriate socket due to spelling errors. So you do want to make sure that you keep the same name convention across all your cars. So with that, we're just gonna close all of these. Then we're gonna head to vehicle, parent, open up the parent blueprint. And then in here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna select the BP tutorial self in the components. Gonna press add. And then to make life a little bit simpler, what you're gonna do is go to vehicle, boost, select the mesh. And then in the blueprint, when you click add, it's gonna pop up here as the static mesh boost. And then all we are gonna do is we're gonna add 4 for a quad car, but you're only gonna activate the ones appropriate to whatever car the player is currently driving. So we're just gonna do that real quick. So we're gonna go with LL underscore exhaust. Then we're gonna select that, Control D, rename this to LR, Control D. This one is going to be RL, Control D. Then we're gonna rename this one to RR, and then we're gonna compile. So we're gonna go with the RR, gonna scroll down to where it says socket, parent socket, and if we search for one, we now have these sockets. So the RR is going to correspond to the same socket name, and just do this for all of them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select all 4 meshes. In the search, we're going to look for shadow. And then when it says cast shadow, we're going to set this to false, as well as the visibility. Where it says rendering visible, set this to false. And we're going to close that. And then since mine is about 2 meters, and to make it fit properly, we are going to have to adjust the scale. Mine is going to be about 0.05 to get it to fit on the exhaust. Then we're going to save that. If you do want to check, we can go into the view real quick and then just come over here. And then if we search for the visibility, the rendering visible, set this to true. And then as you can see, we now have the mesh and the material in the right spots. I'm going to hide this again. I'm going to compile, head to the graph. We're going to create a new function. To create a new function, then this is going to be is it quad question mark. And then what I'm doing here is we are going to get the SBPG again, control, drag this in. Then we're gonna get BBS garage bars, drag off from there. Gonna get a reference, vehicle ID, gonna drop that on the pin, drag from the get, then we're gonna break, and then we're gonna expand this, and then we're just gonna scroll down until we get to quad, drag off from there, promote this to a variable, gonna name it as is, connect the execution pin, select the break, hide unconnected, want to compile, save, head to the event graph. On the configuration custom event, I'm going to drag in the new function, connect it at the end, and then want to head over to the boost, drag from the timeline, drag this out a bit, and then what we're going to do is we're going to drag in the static meshes, full control, drag them in. I missed one. And then from any one of them, we're going to drag off and then we're going to look for set visibility. Then we're going to connect this to the bottom, to the reset force. Just make sure to connect all of them to the set visibility node. And then where it says new visibility, we're going to leave this as false. And then from there, we're going to connect this to the reverse for the timeline. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another function real quick. So add, and then we're going to call this check if quad question mark. And then what we'll do here is we are going to drag in the variable quad, hold control, drag it in, drag off from there, look for branch, connect the execution pin. And then if it's true, we're going to take the 4 static meshes, hold control, drag them in. Then we're going to look for the set visibility, connect all 4 to the set visibility. Then we're going to connect this to the true. So if it is a car with quad exhaust, we're going to set all 4 to true. And then if it is not, then we're just going to select the ones that we need. If you have more cars, then the checks and balances is going to be more extensive than what I'm doing in the tutorial. We're going to need to add things like checking if the dual exhaust is either on the left or on the right, if the car only has a single exhaust, and then if it does have a single exhaust, is the single exhaust on the left or on the right. But for the purpose of the tutorial, I am simplifying it and then only checking if it's quad or not, and then simply displaying the appropriate mesh for if that is true or not. So we're going to take the set visibility, Control D, and then take the appropriate meshes. In this case, it would be the two at the top, the right left and left right. Control D, connect these to the target, connect this to the false, and then we're going to compile, save, head back to the event graph, and then we're going to take the newly created function, connect this to the top after the decrease boost, connect the execution pin, and then we're going to connect this to the play on the timeline, and then that will be it. I'm going to compile, save, then we're going to head to the main menu, content, maps, main menu, open up the main menu level because we need to start over. So we're going to play from here. Then we're going to hit play. I'm going to select a car. So yes. While I was at it, I went to go and correct the incorrect value from last time with the LF. So I'm going to update that code again.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I have corrected the code for the gauge real quick. So if we try and play the level with the boost, so if we press the boost button, you can see that the mesh does display and then disappears when you let go. Do it again. So now we're gonna go and purchase the Venom and then see if the code works. So now Venom, then boost, it displays from the center. Then if we go again, so if I tested out the code, we saw that it does work and there are no error messages whatsoever. So with that, that brings us to the end of this video, and until the next one.